Story, content. The reception hall went silent. Every head turned toward the microphone where my stepdaughter Claire had just finished her toast, thanking my father, Richard Pemberton, for finally being here for the most important day of my life. Not the retired firefighter who'd pulled her from a burning apartment when she was 7. Not the man who'd spent 21 years showing up. I stood at the back table, watching 300 wedding guests applaud the man who'd abandoned her before she could walk. I set down my water glass. The ice clinked against the crystal, sharp in the sudden quiet. My hands were steady. 21 years, as a firefighter, teaches you to stay calm when everything's burning down around you. That morning had started differently. I'd woken up at 5:30 in my small apartment in East Vancouver, the one I'd moved into 6 months ago after Claire told me I couldn't walk her down the aisle. The rain was hammering against the windows the way it does in November, and I lay there thinking about the last time I'd seen her. "Marcus," she'd said, not looking at me. We were sitting in a Starbucks in Kitsilano, halfway between her condo and my new place. "I need to talk to you about the wedding." I'd known something was wrong. She'd been distant for months, ever since Richard had reappeared in her life the previous spring. He'd shown up at her law school graduation, driving a Tesla, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension, CEO of some tech company in Toronto. The man who'd walked out on her mother when Claire was 18 months old and never paid a dime in child support. "What about it?" I'd asked. She'd twisted her engagement ring around her finger. "Ethan's parents are very traditional. His father is a Superior Court judge. His mother is on the board of the Vancouver Art Gallery. They're expecting a certain kind of wedding." "Okay." "And Richard has offered to pay for everything. The venue, the flowers, the photographer, everything." I'd felt something tighten in my chest, but I'd kept my voice level. "That's generous of him. He wants to walk me down the aisle." She'd finally looked at me then, her eyes pleading. "Marcus, please understand. Ethan's family, they don't really get the whole stepfather thing. And Richard, he looks the part. He's successful. He's polished. The photos will be better. The photos will be better." I'd sat there for a long moment, watching the rain streak down the window. I thought about the night of the fire, how I'd kicked down her bedroom door and found her huddled in the closet, coughing, terrified. How she'd wrapped her arms around my neck and wouldn't let go even after we got outside. How she'd called me Dad for the first time in the ambulance. "Is this what you want?" I'd asked finally. "I think it's for the best." "All right then." She'd looked surprised. "You're not mad? Claire, you're 25 years old. You get to make your own decisions." I'd stood up. "I hope you have a beautiful wedding. You're still invited. As a guest, I'll think about it." I hadn't heard from her for 2 weeks after that. Then, 3 weeks before the wedding, she'd called. "Marcus, I need a favor." "What's that?" "The florist wants a deposit. $15,000. Richard said he'd cover it, but apparently his funds are tied up in some investment thing for another week. Can you help? Just temporarily. He'll pay you back right after." I'd sat down slowly. $15,000. I know it's a lot. But Marcus, this is my wedding. Everything has to be perfect. Ethan's mother is already judging every detail. Please? I'd looked around my small apartment, at the furniture I'd had for 20 years, at the walls I'd painted myself, at the photo on my desk from Claire's high school graduation, her in her cap and gown, me in my dress uniform, both of us grinning. "Let me check my account," I'd said. "I'll call you back." I'd called my financial advisor instead, pulled $15,000 from my retirement savings, sent it to the florist directly with Claire's name on the order. When I'd called her back, I'd said, "It's taken care of." "Oh my God, Marcus, thank you. Thank you so much. Richard will send you a check next week." There had never been a check. Now, standing in the reception hall of the Fairmont Hotel Vancouver, watching Richard Pemberton bask in applause he didn't deserve, I felt that same tightness in my chest. Claire's mother, Jennifer, was sitting at the head table next to Richard, smiling. We'd been divorced for 3 years, ever since I'd finally accepted that she was never going to choose me over her daughter's ambitions. The DJ was setting up for the next song. Ethan's father, the judge, was holding court at a nearby table, looking satisfied. This was exactly the kind of wedding he'd wanted for his son. Respectable, connected, the right people saying the right things. I started walking toward the exit. Marcus, I turned. Jennifer was hurrying across the floor, her heels clicking on the polished wood. You're leaving? Nothing for me to do here. Please don't make a scene. I'm not making anything. I'm just going home. She grabbed my arm. She's still your daughter, despite everything. Is she? Because today she introduced Richard as her father, not stepfather, not the man who raised her. Father, Jennifer's face crumpled slightly. She's young. She's caught up in Ethan's world. She'll realize eventually. Will she? I looked past her at Claire, radiant in her wedding dress, laughing at something Ethan's mother was saying. Or will she just keep choosing the version of her life that looks better in photos? That's not fair. You're right. I'm sorry. I gently removed her hand from my arm. Congratulations on the wedding. It's beautiful. I made it almost to the door before I heard my name over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one more person who'd like to say a few words. The MC's voice carried across the room. Marcus Chen, who helped raise our beautiful bride. Marcus, where are you? I froze, turned slowly. The MC was scanning the crowd, microphone in hand. Claire's face had gone pale. She was shaking her head frantically at the MC, but he wasn't looking at her. There he is. Marcus, come on up. I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. Ethan's father was watching with polite interest. Richard Pemberton looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Claire was gripping Ethan's hand, whispering urgently in his ear. I thought about walking out, just turning around and leaving, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the look on Jennifer's face, hopeful and desperate. Maybe it was the memory of 7-year-old Claire, clinging to me in that ambulance, saying, I knew you'd come, Dad. Or maybe it was the fact that I was 62 years old, retired, living alone in a small apartment, and I had exactly one person in the world I'd called my daughter for 21 years, and she'd just erased me in front of 300 people. I walked to the microphone. The room was absolutely still. I looked out at the crowd, at the elegant tables with their centerpieces of white roses and eucalyptus, at the ice sculpture melting slowly near the bar, at the faces watching me with curiosity or pity or polite attention. Thank you, I said. My voice sounded strange over the speakers, rougher than I'd expected. I'll be brief. I looked at Claire. She was frozen, her champagne glass halfway to her lips. Claire, I remember the night you were 7. There was an electrical fire in our building on Commercial Drive. Your mom was working the night shift at the hospital. I was already outside when I realized you weren't with me. I ran back up those stairs, kicked down the door to your bedroom, and found you in the closet. Do you remember what you said to me? She didn't answer. The room was so quiet I could hear the rain against the windows. You said, I knew you'd come, Dad. That was the first time you called me that. Not Marcus, Dad. I paused, my throat tight. We sat in the ambulance, both of us covered in soot, and you wouldn't let go of my hand. The paramedic had to pry your fingers loose to check your vitals. I could see tears starting in Claire's eyes, but I kept going. I taught you to drive in that old Honda Civic I'd had since before you were born. Spent every Saturday afternoon in the Save On Foods parking lot, teaching you to parallel park. You cried when you failed your first road test, and I told you it was okay. We'd try again. And we did. 5 times. A few people laughed softly. Claire was staring at her plate. I sat through every parent-teacher conference, every dance recital, every soccer game, even though you were terrible at soccer. More quiet laughter. When your mom got breast cancer, you were 16. You remember that year? Jennifer was crying now, trying to hide her face. You'd come home from school and go straight to your room, wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat. I'd sit outside your door and talk to you through it. About nothing. About everything. About how your mom was strong. About how we'd get through it. And eventually you'd open the door and we'd sit together, not saying much, just being there. I looked at Richard Pemberton. He was staring at his hands. Richard, I want you to know, I don't hate you. I don't even dislike you. You made a choice 23 years ago to leave. That was your choice. And I made a choice to stay. That was mine. I turned back to Claire. But I need to say this, sweetheart. Being a father isn't about DNA. It's not about who shows up for photos. It's not about who has the better suit or the nicer car or the more impressive job title. My voice cracked slightly, and I had to pause. It's about who shows up for the hard days, the scary nights, the ordinary Tuesdays. It's about who sits in the emergency room at 3 in the morning when you have appendicitis, who helps you move into your first apartment, who listens to you cry about your first breakup and doesn't judge, who's just there. I could see Ethan watching me, his expression unreadable. His father was frowning. Claire, you're an adult. You make your own choices. I respect that. I don't agree with it, but I respect it. I gripped the microphone stand, steadying myself. But I want you to know something. I'll always be the guy who'd run into a burning building for you. Not for credit, not for applause, not for a spot in a photo album, because that's what love is. That's what being a father is. I let go of the microphone. The room was completely silent. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave now. I'm going to go home to my apartment. And I'm going to hope that someday, when you look back at today, you remember that there was someone here who loved you enough to tell you the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. I looked at Richard again. Congratulations on finally showing up. I hope it's the start of something real. I stepped away from the microphone. Wait. The voice was small, choked. Claire was standing, her napkin crumpled in her fist. Dad, wait. I stopped, turned. She was crossing the floor, not running, but not walking either. Her wedding dress rustling. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. I'm sorry. Her voice broke. I'm so sorry. She threw her arms around me, and I felt her shoulders shaking. The room erupted in whispers. I don't know what I was thinking. She sobbed into my shoulder. I got so caught up in Ethan's world, in wanting everything to be perfect, in wanting to fit in with his family. I forgot what actually mattered. I held her. The way I'd held her that night after the fire. The way I'd held her through 100 other crises. It's okay, I said quietly. It's not okay. You're my father. You've always been my father. And I treated you like you were nothing. Over her shoulder, I could see Richard standing awkwardly at the head table. Ethan had risen, looking uncertain. His father was watching with a face like stone. Claire, I said gently, pulling back to look at her. You don't have to do this now. It's your wedding day. Exactly. It's my wedding day. And the person who should have walked me down the aisle is standing in the back of the room because I was too worried about what people would think. She wiped at her eyes, smearing mascara. I was ashamed of you, of us, of the fact that you're a firefighter and not a CEO, that we lived in a small apartment and not a mansion, that our life wasn't as polished as Richard's. Claire, no, let me finish. She took a shaky breath. When I was little, I used to tell people my dad was a superhero, because you saved people. You ran into fires when everyone else was running out. And then I grew up and decided that wasn't impressive enough, that I needed someone who looked better in photos. She turned to face the room, still holding my hand. I need to say something, she called out, her voice stronger now. To all of you. Richard Pemberton is my biological father, but Marcus Chen is my dad. He's been my dad since I was 4 years old, and I almost threw that away because I was embarrassed that he wasn't rich enough, successful enough, polished enough for this crowd. Ethan's mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Mom, Claire said, looking at Jennifer, why didn't you stop me? Jennifer stood slowly, tears streaming down her face. Because I made the same mistake. I let you convince me that image mattered more than love, that fitting into Ethan's world was more important than honoring the man who raised you. I'm sorry, Marcus. I should have fought harder. It's not your fault, I said. Yes, it is. Jennifer crossed to where we stood. I enabled this. I let her push you aside because I wanted her to be happy, and I confused happiness with status. The whispers were getting louder now. I could see Ethan's father having an intense, whispered conversation with Ethan's mother, and then a voice from the back of the room. "I think we need to hear from Richard." Everyone turned. A woman was standing near the entrance, elegant in a navy dress, her gray hair swept up. I didn't recognize her. "Who are you?" Richard demanded, his face flushing. "Victoria Pemberton, your first wife." She walked forward calmly, her heels clicking. "Though I suppose you didn't mention me, did you? Or wife number 2? Or wife number 3? The room exploded in whispers. "What are you doing here?" Richard hissed. "I was invited." Victoria's smile was cool. She looked at me. "Marcus contacted me 3 weeks ago. Asked me to come today. Said he wanted to make sure Claire had all the information before making her choice." Claire's hand tightened on mine. "What information?" Victoria opened her purse and pulled out a folder. "Richard Pemberton has been married 4 times. He left the first 3 wives when they got pregnant. Claimed he wasn't ready for fatherhood. I have the divorce papers here. Would you like to see them?" "That's enough," Ethan's father said sharply, standing. "Is it?" Victoria turned to him. "Because I also have copies of 3 restraining orders filed against Richard by 3 different women, including me, domestic disturbance calls. A DUI he managed to get expunged from his record through some very expensive lawyers." Richard's face had gone from red to white. "You have no right." "I have every right. Because 6 months ago, when you decided to play doting father to salvage your image for a CEO position that requires a family man persona, you called me, asked me to sign a statement saying we'd parted amicably, offered me $10,000 to disappear quietly." Victoria looked at Claire. "I said no. Because I've been watching you, Claire. Following your career. I know what it's like to be used by this man. And when Marcus called me, told me what was happening, I decided someone needed to know the truth." The silence was absolute. Ethan's mother stood up, her face rigid. "This is outrageous. Ethan, we're leaving." "No." Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. "Mom, sit down." "Ethan," I said, "sit down." He looked at Claire. "Is this true? You told me your real dad was this successful businessman, and your stepdad was just, what did you say? The guy who married my mom when I was little?" Claire's face crumpled. "Ethan, why would you lie about Marcus? He's a firefighter. He saved people's lives. He saved your life." Ethan looked at me. "She told me you were just her mom's ex-husband, that you weren't close." "We weren't close these last 6 months," I said quietly. Ethan turned back to Claire. "Did you know about this? About Richard?" "No." Claire was shaking. "I swear, I didn't know. But you didn't care to find out, did you? You just wanted the version of your father that looked good on paper." "That's not fair," Claire said, but her voice was weak. "Isn't it?" Ethan's voice was gentle but relentless. "Claire, I love you. But this? Choosing a man you barely know over the person who raised you? Just because he's rich? That's not the person I thought I was marrying." "Ethan, please." He held up a hand. "I'm not calling off the wedding, but we need to talk, really talk, about what matters to you, about what kind of family you want to build." He looked at his parents. "Because I don't want to build the kind of family that values image over integrity." His father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Richard Pemberton started backing toward the exit. "I don't have to listen to this." "You're right, you don't." Victoria's voice was sharp. "But before you go, I think Claire should know that you never intended to pay Marcus back for the florist. I heard you bragging to your assistant on the phone last week about how you convinced the stepdad to cover the deposit." Claire spun to look at me. "You paid for the flowers?" $15,000, Victoria confirmed. "Marcus pulled it from his retirement savings. Richard told you his funds were tied up, but he was lying. He just didn't want to spend his own money. Is that true?" Claire's voice was barely a whisper. I said nothing. "Marcus?" Her eyes were wide. "You paid for my flowers? After I told you that you couldn't walk me down the aisle?" "They're your flowers," I said simply. "You wanted them. You needed help. That's what dads do." She made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "What dads do. After everything I said to you, everything I did, yes." Richard was at the exit now. I'm leaving. This is a circus. Run, Victoria called after him. It's what you do best. The doors swung shut behind him. The room was utterly silent. Claire turned to face the guests, still gripping my hand. I need to say something else. To all of you. Especially to you, Judge Morrison, and Mrs. Morrison. Ethan's parents stiffened. You wanted a certain kind of wedding, a certain kind of family. Well, this is my family. She gestured to me, to Jennifer, to Victoria still standing calmly by the entrance. It's not perfect. It's messy and complicated and real. And I almost threw it away to impress you. Claire, Ethan's mother, began. No, let me finish. Ethan is right. I need to figure out what kind of person I want to be. And the kind of person I want to be is someone who doesn't forget where she came from, who doesn't trade loyalty for status. She looked at me, tears streaming. Someone who remembers that the only father who ever mattered is standing right here. I pulled her into another hug, and she clung to me like she had that night in the ambulance, 21 years ago. I'm so sorry, Dad, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I know, sweetheart, I know. Can you forgive me? I pulled back, looked at her tear-stained face, at the wedding dress that had cost more than my car, at the reception hall full of people who'd witnessed her revelation. There's nothing to forgive, I said. You're my daughter. That doesn't change, no matter what. But it should change. I was awful to you. You were lost. There's a difference. I brushed a tear from her cheek. And now you're found. Ethan came over, put his arm around Claire's shoulders. I think we need to take a break, talk, figure some things out. I understand, Claire said. Good. He looked at me. Marcus, would you join us? I think there's a lot I don't know about my wife's family, and I'd like to change that. Over the next hour, the reception transformed into something else entirely. Some of Ethan's parents' friends left, making disapproving noises, but most people stayed. The DJ kept playing. People danced. Claire changed out of her wedding dress into a simpler dress she'd brought for the after-party, and I sat with Claire, Ethan, Jennifer, and Victoria in a small room off the main hall, talking. I don't understand, Claire said, looking at Victoria. Why did you come? You don't even know me. I know what it's like to be fooled by Richard Pemberton, Victoria said. I was young when I married him, thought he was everything I wanted, successful, charming, sophisticated. It took me 3 years to realize he was a fraud. By the time I left, I had a restraining order and a lot of therapy bills. Did you have children? Jennifer asked. No. He left when I got pregnant. I miscarried shortly after. Victoria's face was calm, but I could see the old pain there. I've spent the last 20 years building a life without him. I run a non-profit for domestic violence survivors in Toronto. When Marcus reached out, told me what was happening, I saw a chance to keep Richard from doing to you what he did to me. Which was, Claire asked quietly, making you doubt your own judgment, making you think that what matters is how things look, not how they are. Victoria looked at me. Marcus told me about the fire, about teaching you to drive, about your mother's cancer. He didn't ask me to come to ruin your wedding. He asked me to come so you'd have the information you needed to make a real choice. Claire turned to me. You knew about all of this? About Richard's past? I suspected, I said. I did some digging after you told me he was walking you down the aisle. Found Victoria through a mutual contact at the fire department. Her brother's a firefighter in Toronto. We talked. She agreed to come if I thought it was necessary. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Would you have believed me? I asked gently. 6 months ago, when you were convinced Richard was this successful, loving father who'd finally come back for you? Or would you have thought I was jealous? She was silent. I wanted you to have all the information, I said. But I wanted it to be your choice, not mine. So you were just going to let me marry Ethan, let Richard walk me down the aisle, without saying anything? I was going to give a speech, I admitted. Tell you I loved you. Hope you'd remember what mattered. But I wasn't going to force you to choose me. Why not? Because love isn't about force. It's about showing up, about being there even when you're not chosen, about doing the right thing even when no one's watching. I reached across the table, took her hand. I paid for your flowers because I wanted you to have the wedding you dreamed of, even if I wasn't part of it. I invited Victoria because I wanted you to have the truth, even if it hurt. And I was going to walk away today because I wanted you to be happy, even if it meant letting you go. Claire was crying again, silently. Ethan handed her his handkerchief. That's love, I said. That's what being a father means, and blood doesn't have anything to do with it. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then Claire said, I want to start over. What do you mean? I want to walk back into that reception hall. I want to introduce you properly, not as the guy who helped raise me, as my father, my dad. She looked at Ethan. If that's okay. It's more than okay, Ethan said. It's how it should have been all along. So we did. Claire and I walked back into the reception together, her hand in mine. The conversations died down as we approached the microphone. Everyone, Claire said, her voice stronger now. I need to make a correction. Earlier, I introduced Richard Pemberton as my father. That was wrong. My father is Marcus Chen. He raised me. He loved me. He's been there for every important moment of my life. And I'm sorry it took me this long to say it publicly. The applause started slowly, then built. Jennifer was crying again, smiling. Ethan's father was watching with an unreadable expression, but his mother was clapping. Victoria, standing in the back, nodded at me and slipped out quietly. Her job was done. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Claire asked me to dance, something we hadn't done since her high school graduation. Ethan's father approached me during the dinner, shook my hand, and said, My son is lucky to be marrying into a family that values integrity. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. As the night wound down and the guests began to leave, Claire pulled me aside. I know I can't undo what I did, she said. I can't take back the last 6 months, but I want to try to make it right. How? Therapy. For me. Maybe for both of us, if you're willing. I need to understand why I did this. Why I was so quick to trade you for someone who looked better on paper. She paused. And I need to pay you back for the flowers. Keep your money. Dad, I'm serious. Use it for your honeymoon. Or save it for a house. Or donate it to a charity in Victoria's name. But don't pay me back. It was a gift. You shouldn't have had to give it. No, I agreed. But I wanted to. And that's the difference. She hugged me again, fierce and tight. I love you, she said. I'm sorry I forgot that love is more important than image. I love you too, sweetheart. I always have. I always will. 6 months later, I got a call from Claire. She and Ethan had been in counseling, working through the issues that the wedding had brought to light. She'd started volunteering with Victoria's nonprofit, using her law degree to help domestic violence survivors with legal aid. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, she told me over coffee at the same Starbucks where she'd told me I couldn't walk her down the aisle. About showing up, about being there, even when you're not chosen. Yeah? I want to do better. I want to be the kind of person who values people for who they are, not what they can do for me. She smiled, tentative. I want to be more like you. You're doing fine, Claire. I'm trying. Ethan's parents are still difficult sometimes. They have these expectations. But Ethan's been amazing. He told his father that if he couldn't respect our family, he wouldn't be part of our lives. She paused. Our family. That includes you, Dad. I know. Do you forgive me? Really? I thought about that question. About forgiveness and love and what it means to be a father. About the years I'd spent showing up, the years she'd spent taking it for granted, the moment she'd erased me in front of 300 people. There's nothing to forgive, I said again. You're my daughter. That's not something you can lose, even when you try. She cried then, relief and gratitude and love all mixed together. Jennifer and I reconciled slowly, carefully. We'd never remarry, too much had happened, but we'd found a friendship, a partnership in loving Claire. Sometimes that was enough. Richard Pemberton disappeared back to Toronto. I heard through Victoria that the CEO position had fallen through after a background check revealed some of what she'd shared. He'd sent Claire a few emails, trying to explain, to rebuild. She'd deleted them without reading. I have a father, she'd told me. I don't need another one. Ethan became a regular presence in my life. We'd meet for lunch, talk about hockey and law and life. He'd asked me, haltingly, if I'd be willing to be involved when they had children someday. I want our kids to know their grandfather, he'd said. The real one. I'd agreed, honored, and humbled. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it, raising a child who wasn't mine. Spending 21 years building a relationship that almost shattered over photo optics. Pulling $15,000 from my retirement to pay for flowers at a wedding where I wasn't wanted. I tell them no, because that's what love is. It's not transaction. It's not keeping score. It's showing up even when it's hard. Even when you're not appreciated. Even when you're erased. It's running into burning buildings when everyone else is running out. It's being a father to a child who might forget, but never stops needing you. And in the end, that night at the reception hall when Claire threw her arms around me and called me Dad in front of everyone who'd heard her deny me, that made every hard moment worth it. Because sometimes the truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to show up. And keep showing up, even when it's not convenient. Even when it's not wanted. Because that's what real fathers do, and blood has nothing to do with it.